Hello everyone, my name's Laeticia Sevin and welcome to the International Opportunities Podcast. This series will give you an insight into our students' first-hand experiences abroad, whether that be a study exchange or work placement. From Fiji to Canada, our students have done amazing things abroad and we want to showcase that to all of you. If you're thinking about going abroad for your studies or for work, then this series will hopefully give you some inspiration, tips and advice. Today we have Fraser Drummond-Hay in the studio. Do you want to introduce yourself for us?
Hi, I'm Fraser. I'm a second year Prosthetics and Orthotics student here at the University of Salford. Just finished my second year now, and just last year I spent a month in Uganda working with a charity called Knowledge for Change, part of our exchange program, where we were doing sort of prosthetics and orthotic skills in clinics over there. So prosthetics and orthotics. Obviously, prosthetics is replacement limbs for amputees, whereas orthotics is anything external to a limb that assists it. So that can be something like an insole in a shoe, or it can be bracing on a leg due to fractures and that sort of thing. So it's quite a wide variety of things.
Great, and can you tell us a bit about the work placement programme with Knowledge for Change and how you found out about it?
So Knowledge for Change is a clinical exchange programme. So Ugandan clinicians come over to the UK, come to our facilities and learn from us, and we do the same as students, vice versa. It wasn't just prosthetics and orthotic students, but there was other students out there like paramedics and nursing students and midwives. And they also help run clinics, help fund the clinics, help fund the staff over there. Because they're a charity based in the university, they're actually founded by some former students. They've got a really close link to the course. So we were very aware of the opportunity, basically straight away on the course. It was introduced to us. And then they came in and spoke to us about it. So they had a very direct link to us. So there was no need to find out about it per se. They sort of reached out to us and said, this is an opportunity here for you.
That's great. And what motivated you to pursue a work placement?
I think it was just the opportunity to just do something unique, I guess. With prosthetics and orthotics, you don't get any hands-on clinical experience really until the third year of the course, just the way it's structured. You do sort of work with patients in the university, but in actual sort of real-life clinics, that's not until the third year. So this was an opportunity for me to get some hands-on clinical experience sort of way before everyone else would be able to.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but do that in a completely different environment to what I'm expecting. So it was sort of like a double whammy of being able to get stuck in earlier than I would be able to normally, and also be able to do it in a way which isn't normally available to people.
Yeah, it's really put you in good stead for your third year as well. And were there any particular skills that you were looking to develop from doing the placement?
Honestly, it was just sort of, again, for the first time, actually using my clinical skills, which I've been learning, obviously learning in theory, but you've not really put it into proper practice. So I think it was, you know, it's very hard to predict what kind of situations you get in a clinic. No two patients are ever the same.
Yeah.
So you learn about things in university and you practice on professional patients, but they're very standardized. So I think for me, I was just kind of looking forward to what kind of scenarios would I not be expecting and like how do I tackle that? Obviously, being only a first year student, I needed a lot of guidance because there really was a lot of, I was out of my depth in quite a few areas, but thankfully they were really good at supporting me through all of it.
Were the resources quite different in Uganda?
I would say for the clinic we were working in, it was actually quite well equipped. All the same things we used here in university, we were using out there. I mean, with prosthetics, you can get some very fancy equipment, but in university, they always teach you sort of the baseline principles, and that's what they were using out there. So thankfully, a lot of it transferred really nicely over. And because that clinic itself was being quite partly funded, obviously through the Ugandan government, but also through the charity, it meant that we were quite well equipped for a lot of things. It's quite interesting. The Ugandan healthcare system is free, but patients often have to pay for things like, you know, many medicines they use, but the treatment itself is free. So there was a weird in-between where we were quite well funded and equipped to give out things, but everything we did had to be really carefully logged to make sure we weren't wasting anything. Yeah. Which obviously as a student, and you're very scared of doing something wrong, you're very mindful of not wasting. You know, we go through plaster bandages like they're nothing here in the UK, whereas out there you're very aware that it's expensive and it's hard to replace.
And what were your expectations before going abroad, and how did the actual experience compare?
I mean, to be quite frank, I tried to keep my expectations to a minimal, and I think that's that's good advice for anyone doing anything abroad, because no matter what picture you put in your head, the reality is always completely different, even for better or for worse. Obviously, I think my family had more expectations than I did. I'd watched a lot of sort of travel influencers and YouTubers who've been around sort of, you know, Central Africa, so I had a rough idea of it's not really the typical water aid image people have in their heads. You know, there's a whole life there. And so I tried not to have too many going into it. And even still, I think reality is a lot more like just normal than people expect. You don't see as many crazy things. It's a very normal life. I don't know. I don't like to put expectations out there too much.
I agree. That's what I did when I did my exchange trip. I was like, not going in with any expectations. Just want to see how it goes. And yeah, you just You see it when you're there, don't you?
I think, like I said, my family had more expectations than I did about what I might encounter, what kind of dangers there'd be. It's like there's completely nothing like that.
No.
So obviously do research, but don't build an image too specific, because it will never quite be that image.
That's really good advice. And where did you stay whilst you were there?
So thankfully the charity have like a sort of small house, fenced off house compound.
Yeah.
It feels weird to call it a compound. It sounds intimidating. It was a house with a big fence around it, just on the sort of the outskirts of town in the suburbs. We were staying in Fort Portal, which is up in the northwest of the country, which is a very, very rural town. There's only about 50,000 people, so it's quite small, but it's sort of the regional capital for the area. So we were staying in sort of a house the charity provided, and we were there with a lot of other students. I think at its most packed there was 4 of us, sorry, there was 6 of us from the University of Salford, P&O students there, but there was a total of about 12 or even like 15 students at one point from other universities doing other courses. So we got quite busy, just a lot of students, drinking and partying.
Yeah. Did you make a lot of connections then there as well?
So people mostly from like Birmingham and around Liverpool. So there's quite a lot of universities involved. Even their lecturers were out with us at one point, which was, it was an interesting experience. Obviously, none of our lecturers were out with us, thankfully. I don't know if it makes it better or worse, to be honest. Your lecturers are there with you.
And can you share any cultural insights from your time overseas?
Cultural insights? I don't know how to call it an insight, but, you certainly... Art cultures are very different, but also just very similar in weird ways. So Ugandans are from what I learned, they're very sort of conservative on the outside, like in public facing. They're very conservative. They like to build a very proper image of themselves. And then in private, they like to drink a lot and they like to party a lot. And there's quite a fun contrast between them. And you kind of realise that you're very similar in a lot of ways in that regard. When you picture countries with like a drinking culture, you think of like the UK and like
big drinking culture.
Yeah, exactly. You don't normally attribute it to places like Uganda, but then you find out that it's like it's about £2 and you can buy a whole bottle of spirits. And you're like, oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
And that, even by Ugandan standards, it's not typically that expensive. Alcohol's not taxed, so people drink a lot, and it's not an image people normally give you of like Africa and what you expect when you're going away on a placement. It's like, you'll be doing a lot of drinking. You go to pub quizzes and have fun. There's a few more. There's things like we had pet names, which is due to the region. Like the local people have there's like a list of 11 names, and then people get a name given to them by their peers based on like their personality.
Oh, cool. What was yours?
So I think mine was Mpuli, which and the meaning of it was, and they only gave us this at the end of like the 4 weeks, so I knew it was actually, they did put time into thinking based on how they knew us over that time. They gave us a name, but it meant something along the lines of like womanizer. And it's not because I was doing anything untoward.
Okay.
It's because we would go to like different placements and wards in the hospital, and then the older women's staff would come up to me and go like, oh, do you want to like show me a picture of their daughter, like, would you like to marry my daughter? So I think they saw that and were like, oh, he's a womanizer.
Did you come back with a wife then?
No. I mean, I don't think my girlfriend at the time appreciated it. I was very loyal, but I don't think she appreciated it when I told her the nickname I got. But it'd be something like, like other names would be like Kiki, which they'd give to girls, and it basically just means like a cute, nice person. I can't remember what the name was, but one of them basically means a woman who's a bit of like a lioness, a bit of a strong, shouty woman, and they gave that to one of our students.
I think that would be mine.
I don't think she appreciated it at the time, but we were like, it definitely fits her. She's got a strong personality.
And what was your favourite memory or experience?
We did a lot of things, to be honest. I mean, we'd have the weekends off, so we'd be working 9 to 5 during the weekdays, and then the weekends off, we'd be free to, go off. And up in the Fort Portal, it's very rural, so you're quite close to a lot of like safari parks and national parks. So we would have the weekends off to be tourists, basically. And then we did some amazing things, like obviously safaris are amazing, but we also did chimp trekking.
Oh, wow.
We managed on the last weekend to do river rafting down the Nile, which was...
Down the Nile? That sounds incredible.
Yeah, it's a whitewater rafting, and it was very, very intense. There's a few hairy moments in it, but we were looked after very well, and it was amazing. I think it sort of linked one very funny moment actually that stuck out to me, and it sort of linked to a bit of the cultural differences. Every Wednesday we'd go to a bar and do a pub quiz, and it's one of the best pub quizzes I've ever been to. It was free to enter. You just showed up, you put down your name on a piece of paper, or you put down your team name, and then they'd do it by round, and everyone, if you won the round, you just got a round of beers, and they did it by the rounds. It's not like one of those pub quizzes, you have to wait for the whole thing. And I mean, the vibe was great, but they had all these TVs around with the answers, and one of the rounds was like we normally wouldn't win because it normally be a lot of like local Ugandan sort of facts and history, which obviously we didn't know. But one of the rounds was the exotic fruit round, and obviously we weren't sure what kind of exotic fruits, and it came up with something like a kiwi was like one of the answers, and they were all like completely, because they obviously just don't have kiwis there, so they were completely dumbstruck with it. So this is like one of the rounds we absolutely like demolished them all on. And then when they announced our team name, like we were like cheering, and then all the Ugandans in the bar turned to us and just gave us like a really approving nod, like
love that.
well done, you deserve this.
We
one.
made it.
And it was all because of kiwis apparently. So.
And what were some of the challenges that you faced while you were there, and how did you overcome them?
I think challenge-wise, it's hard to say like specific challenges. There's things obviously you get used to. Like obviously when you think of countries like Uganda, and you think you won't have all the same utilities and necessities you have, say, back home. But there's often a workaround solution to absolutely everything. Like you can't drink the water out of the taps, but there's a guy who delivers fresh water to your door like once every couple of days if you pay him to. Things like that. So there's only more sort of, you just pay more attention to things. You appreciate things more. Like there's dust absolutely everywhere. So everything you own, if you own anything that's like white clothing, it gets absolutely stained with this like fine dust. And even now, like a year later, I still can't get out some of my clothes.
Still finding dust everywhere.
Yeah, it's not like the kind of challenges, like a lot of things are difficult, but there's always like a workaround solution. And it sort of makes you appreciate things more. But we were very well looked after, thankfully. So I think a lot of the challenges some people there may experience, we thankfully were sheltered from.
Yeah.
I think one thing that got me was there's a lack of cheese.
A lack of cheese.
I know,
No.
and it hits you harder than you think, honestly. Because I don't know. I guess just due to the climate and obviously the cost of like refrigeration and stuff, it's just not a local thing. They just don't eat a lot of cheese. So like,
I never even thought about that.
it's incredibly expensive. We found an Indian supermarket that does sell it, but it was literally £15 for like a block of cheese, and that's like obviously going off UK pounds. So the locals certainly couldn't afford it. It was obviously the shop had realised a lot of tourists and like foreign aid workers come through here will sell cheese because they're going to crave it, but like excessive markups.
No way.
So yeah, that was funny enough. That was the one thing that stuck out to me at the end of the month. I was like, I can't wait to just like eat cheese again.
Yeah. I love cheese. I'm half French, so cheese is it's a must.
Thankfully, in our field of prosthetics and orthotics, there's not that many sort of clinical emergencies. I'd say, if someone's an amputee, obviously it's sad and the situations happen, but it doesn't really progress or get worse urgently. They've already lost the limb. It's not going to get worse. Obviously, we want to give them a new device as soon as possible so they can get back to their activities of daily living. But it's not like a clinical and medical emergency. Whereas obviously some of the other students we were speaking to, or who were out there with us, doing things like nursing, childcare nursing, even mental health nursing, they obviously saw and experienced things which were significantly more, they saw death basically, and they saw a lot of quite nasty situations emerging on the wards. So we would have at the end, the charity looked after all of us extremely well. At the end of each week, they would sort of take us aside and we'd have like a big meeting with the charity. We'd tell them what we did for the week, and they'd help sort of process and go through anything that happened. Yeah. But obviously, like I said, with our field, even when you're working in those conditions and sort of less, more limited resources, it was quite a relaxed environment for us. Some days we were completely busy, other days we had basically no patients at all. So for us, it was quite a relaxed experience. But then those other students had quite, in some cases, sort of slightly more traumatizing or certainly stressful experiences. So we were wondering by the end of it, like, why do we need to do these weekly meetings? Like, all we need to do is just say, yeah, we saw these patients this week, it was great. And then we spoke to those other students who were there with us about their experiences, and obviously some of them had experienced some really horrible things. And we were like, oh, okay, so that makes a lot more sense now why they've got... But like I said, the charity looked after it and managed it really, really well.
That's really good.
But obviously, depending on what kind of field you're doing, what kind of work you're doing, you may have a completely different experience from someone who's working in the same hospital, just in a different ward. Yeah. And, two people can have completely different, outlooks because of it. So it's sort of, for us, it was very relaxed, but I don't want to paint a rosy picture that there's no problems at all, or that you won't ever encounter a difficult scenario, because thankfully, like for us, there's no ethical issues at all. But as in other wards, there's a lot more sort of. If you try to put too many expectations in your head about what to expect, you probably won't get what you're expecting.
Exactly. It's nice to leave it as a little surprise, get there and just see what happens.
And I think if you've already, if you're listening to this and you're already like a healthcare student, you've already sort of gone into the field expecting, if you're a nursing student, you're expecting to see some. My mum's a nurse, so I'm well aware of sort of the kind of things. It can be a bit hairy as a thing. So it depends what you're doing. Obviously, if you're working, if you're studying abroad in Canada or America, you're probably not going to experience that. Whereas if you're doing a work placement, in a developing country, for example, then you kind of go into it with that. You are forewarned about what to expect. So it's not a complete shock, but I think even still, it's a different thing seeing it in person.
Yeah, and it's good to know that the support's available there as well, and that they're hosting the weekly meetings to make sure that everybody's okay as well. I think that's really important.
Oh, absolutely. They handled everything perfectly. And if we ever had even a small issue, not that many of them occurred, but if anything small did ever come up, we ever passed it on to the charity. They handled it amazingly. There was a moment where I was cutting up bandages with a surgical knife and accidentally cut my finger. And obviously there's a big worry about, contamination, blood, AIDS potentially. I was being a bit of a hypochondriac about the whole thing. Yeah. But even still, the charity was very good. Like, well, okay, when you get back home, we'll get you tested. They checked the whole scenario and you'll be fine. And I was, thankfully, completely fine, happy to say.
Good.
But yeah, things like that, if you're out on a work placement, there will be someone obviously you're associated with, and just make sure they are doing their job and looking after you. Feed that back to the university if they're not. Yeah. But you will find that they always normally are really good at supporting.
How many people did you say you lived with again in the house?
I think it sort of ebbed and flowed based on the students coming and going, because some people are there for a month, some people are there for about 3 weeks. I think at its peak there's about 15 of us. Or maybe 16 of us. There were sort of 2 small houses in the compound, so sort of some of them could get shoved over to the next one. And there was a lot of other people with the charity as well, but they were like the professionals, and they were staying in a different house sort of down the road from us. So I think at its busiest, I mean, the organisation had a good about 20 to 30 odd people around. So you were never alone.
No, never alone.
For better or for worse.
When you arrived there, was there anything to help you be introduced to other students or at the locals?
I mean, we were given a huge briefing beforehand about what to expect. Like, again, against the whole, don't have expectations, but there are learn about the culture beforehand. So we were told explicit advice about things, what's appropriate and what isn't. And then when we were out there, we had a fantastic locals who work for the charity. And they do a lot of the management stuff, but they also took us out and about. So for the first day or two we were there, we were basically always sort of following someone around, because we asked them to, because it's really you don't want to get lost in the streets. So we had a local sort of showing us around, doing things. And whenever we wanted to book anything, like we wanted to go off on a safari, we'd refer to him, and he'd go, "Oh yeah, don't worry, I know a guy." And then he'd basically just call a mate of his who knew someone, and then somewhere through the referrals we'd get booked with some sort of place. So it all just kind of worked out in the end. They were really good at sort of. Again, even if it was organising leisure things, like he's like, "Oh yeah, I know the best bars, don't worry," and then show us all the best places to go, and we got that from all of our co-workers as well. So I think that again comes. Obviously for the other students, everyone's all in the same boat, so you bond really quickly over these same experiences.
Definitely.
But I think if you want a work placement, especially, do make a really big effort to make friends with the locals at your work placement you're working with, because they will, they can give you more advice than any tour guide ever will.
Definitely. And what did your week look like on a day-to-day? Were you Monday to Friday? What?
Yeah, so we were working sort of 9 till 5, Monday to Friday, but it's a very relaxed culture, a very relaxed country, so they weren't super strict about work hours. If it was a quiet day and we were, there was no patients around in the afternoon, they would just send us home, because that's just kind of the attitude over there.
That's really good.
Yeah, it was one of the nice things. It's certainly something I miss about the country. Was I think some people are very sort of punctual, strict people probably didn't enjoy it as much. I quite appreciated the very relaxed nature of everything. Exactly. It did also mean they were quite relaxed even during emergencies, which I think threw people off. Not that we had any emergencies, but from what I heard from other students, like people would be very relaxed in very serious scenarios. Which
they do say not to panic in an emergency.
Exactly. So it doesn't make things, it probably helps with things. But I think the 9 to 5, and then like I said, we had weekends off to just sort of do what everyone, and it was up to us to organise that ourselves, and that did come out of our own budget. Obviously, the charity wasn't going to pay for us to go on a safari. So, but even then, you'd be surprised how cheap some things are once you're over there. The main expense was getting to Uganda in the first place, and paying the charity and getting the accommodation. But then when you're over there, like things are surprisingly cheap. Like you can get like a 2-day safari, including staying at. It took us by surprise. There's a hotel in it's a weekend safari. There's a hotel in the middle. We didn't really have any expectations going into it. The hotel was genuinely like just absolutely gorgeous, like luxurious, like 5-star-esque like hotel. But like there was no one there as well, so it was like basically all to ourselves. It was such a surreal experience, and we managed to get that and the whole safari for 2 days, and it was like £150 for the whole thing. Yeah, it's so good. It's genuinely like when you're over there, you can do some amazing things. Really, obviously for us, it's really really cheap. So if you plan ahead, take advantage of it. But obviously you got to have, like it comes into the whole budgeting thing, and you got to look into it beforehand. But I think a lot of the touristy activities like safari or like the water rafting and things like that we did, like it came out a lot cheaper than I expected.
Really?
Yeah, I was thinking while I was there that Uganda is like a fantastic place to do a stag do.
Is it?
Just how like all
that's where your stag do will be.
There's so many crazy things you can do there, and like when you're there, like things like alcohol are so cheap, and you can just have a really good time for not a lot of money.
What was one of your main personal goals while you were in Uganda? Did you have anything specific that you wanted to achieve or work on whilst you were there?
I think for me it was mostly just confidence in clinical skills, because like I said, you learn all this theory, but you don't really get you do get to put it in practice in university, but it's not in a real environment. You're not seeing like an unexpected challenge come up you have to face. So for me personally, it was sort of the ability to just like get stuck in and try something, and sort of you're not being told in advance, oh, this patient's going to come today. It's a patient shows up on the day, and you've got to work and figure out what you need to do to help them. And I do think, I think I managed to achieve it. It was very intimidating. I mean, obviously one of the things you learn a lot, which is very important what we do, is sort of patient communication. And it's one thing communicating to, people you've never met before. It's another thing when you're communicating to someone who's from a completely different culture where English might not even be their first language. A lot of the work we did was with children, which is also another barrier on top of it. So, I'm dealing with children who don't speak English, who are, from a completely different culture to what I'm used to. So it's kind of given me that, well, if I managed to survive that, I think I can probably handle the unexpected scenarios back home a bit easier because of it.
Do you feel like that's given you a leg up since you've got back?
I wouldn't say it made me better in terms of like my clinical skills. I only had an extra month of practice than everyone else, but I do think certainly from like a confidence, just just get stuck in and just don't. You try not to worry as much about things. You realise it's not that big of a deal. You just got to get stuck in and just don't overthink things.
Exactly, problem solving skills.
Exactly. I think just having the balls to take it head on. Just go for it when it comes up.
Yes, definitely. And has the experience opened any opportunities for you since you got back?
Well, our industry is quite an interesting niche where we're incredibly in demand, which is also, if you're looking at a good career, incredibly in demand. So there's no real sort of, I wouldn't say it's opened up any particular doors. I mean, it's certainly opened my eyes up to like wanting to do more work internationally and sort of volunteer work. That the charity does have professional volunteers, so fully qualified individuals who aren't students, but they get paid a small salary, and they often work on like a particular project. There's a lot of midwives and gynecologists who are working with the maternal ward out there, and so it's opened my eyes up to that's an opportunity I could go for in the future. But as for sort of career employment, thankfully in my industry, because they're so in demand, everyone's basically offered a job anyway. So I don't think it'll give me a leg up in that department. But it's certainly, for me personally, what kind of career opportunities I want to look for, it's certainly opened me up to. Definitely.
And what advice would you give to students that are considering a work placement?
I think if you're considering it, then that's a good sign just to go for it. Like I said, don't try and have like any expectations. Don't build up a particular image in your head, because it'll never be quite that. And it could be better or worse than whatever you picture. So that's why I tried, don't try and set expectations. But I think if you are considering it, just go for it. Because even at the end of the day, let's say you go to Canada for a month or 2 months, whatever. Even if you come out of it thinking, I don't really like Canada, that's still in itself an amazing, like, it makes you appreciate what you have at home a lot more.
Exactly.
It makes you feel confident, okay, well, maybe I don't want to live abroad in my life. Maybe I do, like, enjoy being in the UK. And it's vice versa. For me, it was sort of definitely a realization of, I definitely do want to live abroad at some point in my life. So if you are considering it, I think just go for it, because it's not an opportunity you're going to get very often.
No.
It's not very often you get to up sticks and just be somewhere else and live somewhere else and work and try a new life, basically, for even just for a very small time, even if it's just for a month. I think it's sort of, even if it's for better or for worse, you certainly come away with it with a much bigger appreciation of just like the world and life and how what you're going to do with it, basically.
Definitely. I didn't realise how much I would miss Manchester, and I got back and it was lovely to be home. So
I think I was the opposite.
Really?
I was just like, I missed the sun.
It was the weather the weather wasn't great, but I did miss having my friends and family around me. But it's also made me want to go abroad as well and do more travelling abroad. So I feel like you can get a bit of both from that. I appreciate home, but also you get a bit of a travel bug after it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a commitment for your whole life. And exactly. I think that the whole thing of being away from home is, I mean, a lot of us are already away from home for university anyway. Does it actually make a difference if you're, across the country or in a different country? At the end of the day, you're away anyway. You might as well really just see how far you can push it.
Definitely. And in terms of funding and budgeting, what advice would you give students for that?
I wouldn't lie to people and say that it's like, an easy or cheap thing to do, especially with the way costs are nowadays. There is a Turing Fund scheme which you can apply for, and the university does help you with applying for, but it is means tested, so some people get a lot more out of than others. So I don't want to create a false image and lie to people and go, oh yeah, of course it's easy. You really do have to budget for it, so you have to figure out, am I going to have to save a lot of money in advance for this?
Yeah.
I would say that doing a lot of research beforehand and how you can cut costs can actually help. We had to get a lot of vaccines and take anti-malarial tablets, so you obviously had to go to travel clinics and get that sorted. I didn't do my research, and I just went straight to Boots, and they did it for about £300. I got everything. I did go for the maybe for better or for worse, I went for the cheapest anti-malarials I could find, and thankfully it didn't backfire on me. But then some people found, much cheaper deals, and they saved about £100-200 on their vaccines compared to how much I spent. So doing a bit of research about everything you can do. Obviously, don't cut costs to the point where you're not going to enjoy the experience, but you do have to put a bit of legwork into budgeting it. If you go into it blind and you don't have the money, when you're out there, it's certainly going to come back and bite you.
Definitely. Oh, well, thank you so much. It was so lovely meeting you, and thank you for sharing all of your experiences as well with us. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, it was great, thank you.
Now, if you listeners want to find out more about study exchanges or work placements, then please visit the Student Hub International Opportunities page. There you can find out about our drop-in sessions, application processes and partnerships. I'll see you in next week's episode, where we'll be hearing from more of our amazing students about their overseas placements. Please like, share and subscribe to this podcast so you can hear more, and we can spread the word about our international opportunities. We'll see you next time.